12 guests checked in to the Clearwater Hunting Lodge on October 8, 1976. By the morning of October 10th, 11 of them were dead. Their bodies were found arranged like trophies in the main dining hall, positioned in hunting poses, eyes open, frozen in their final moments of terror. The killer had spent 36 hours stalking them through the woods, and he'd written down every single detail. This is the story of how a weekend hunting trip became the hunt itself, and how only one person walked out of those mountains alive.
The Clearwater County Sheriff's Department received Ray Hutchins' call at 8:54 a.m. Sheriff Tom Holloway and 2 deputies arrived at the lodge 43 minutes later. What they found would become one of the most disturbing crime scenes in Idaho history. The bodies were positioned deliberately, not randomly discarded, but arranged, staged. Sheriff Holloway, a 30-year law enforcement veteran who'd seen his share of hunting accidents and domestic violence, later described the scene in his official report. The victims were displayed in hunting-related poses. Several held weapons that had been placed in their hands post-mortem. The killer had taken time to position each body carefully. This wasn't a crime of passion, this was methodical. 11 victims in total, 5 men, 4 women, 2 teenage boys. All had been shot, most with a high-powered rifle, likely a .30-06, based on wound patterns. Several victims showed signs of having been shot while running, wounds to the back, legs, defensive wounds on hands and arms. But the most disturbing detail, not all of them had died in the lodge. Blood trails led from the surrounding forest back to the main building. The killer had hunted them in the woods, killed them, and then dragged their bodies back to the lodge to arrange them. Some of the victims had been dead for more than 24 hours, others less than 12. This had happened over 2 days. Sheriff Holloway called in the Idaho State Police. By 2 p.m., the scene was swarming with investigators, forensic teams, and agents from the FBI's Boise field office. The lodge was owned by Charles and Dorothy Brennan, a retired couple from Seattle who'd purchased the property in 1968. They weren't among the dead. Neither was their son Marcus. And the guest registry showed 12 names checked in for the weekend. 11 bodies had been found. 1 person was missing. The crime scene investigation took 4 days. Forensic teams photographed every inch of the lodge and surrounding grounds. They mapped blood trails, collected shell casings, documented the position of each body. What they pieced together was a timeline of calculated violence. The hunting lodge operated on a simple model. Groups would book the property for weekend stays during hunting season, October through November. The Brennans provided lodging, meals, and access to thousands of acres of prime elk and deer territory. Guests brought their own weapons and hunting licenses. The weekend of October 8, 1976, the lodge had been booked by a group from Spokane, Washington. 12 people total. Richard and Susan Caldwell, ages 48 and 46. Richard owned a construction company. They'd been coming to Clearwater for 3 years. Thomas and Helen Perry, ages 52 and 50. Thomas was a dentist, first-time guests. James Rucker, age 39, single, worked as an accountant, avid hunter. Kyle and Jennifer Marsh, ages 17 and 16, David's son and daughter. Catherine Lowe, age 41, real estate agent, solo guest. Vincent Torres, the teacher, also solo. Plus the Brennans. Charles Brennan, age 68, lodge owner. Dorothy Brennan, age 65, Charles's wife. And their son, Marcus Brennan, age 21,
helped run the lodge. Marcus had grown up at Clearwater. He'd learned to hunt at age 7, knew every trail and ridge in the surrounding forest. He helped his parents manage guests, guided hunting parties, maintained the property. By all accounts, he was quiet, competent, and kept to himself. But Marcus had a secret. He'd been discharged from the University of Idaho 3 months earlier, not for academic reasons, for behavioral issues. A female student had filed a complaint against him after he followed her for 2 weeks, leaving notes in her dorm mailbox. The notes were romantic at first, then increasingly obsessive. When she confronted him, he'd become irate, claiming they were meant to be together. The university counseling office recommended psychiatric evaluation. Marcus refused. His parents withdrew him from school and brought him back to the lodge, believing he just needed time away from the stress of college. They had no idea what was building inside him. Friday, October 8, 1976. The guests arrived in the early afternoon. Charles and Dorothy greeted them warmly, showed them to their cabins, explained the meal schedule and hunting protocols. Marcus stayed in the background, unloading luggage, preparing the dining hall for dinner. At 6 p.m., everyone gathered in the great hall for the traditional welcome dinner. Dorothy had prepared elk stew, fresh bread, roasted vegetables. Wine flowed freely. The guests swapped hunting stories, talked about their lives back in Spokane, made plans for the morning hunt. Marcus served the meal silently. Catherine Lowe, the 41-year-old real estate agent, tried to engage him in conversation. She asked about the best spots for deer. Marcus mumbled a response and retreated to the kitchen. Vincent Torres, the teacher, noticed Marcus staring from the kitchen doorway. Their eyes met. Marcus looked away quickly. Dinner ended around 8:30 p.m. The guests retired to their cabins or stayed in the great hall to drink by the fire. Charles and Dorothy cleaned up with Marcus, then went to bed around 10 p.m. Their private quarters were in a separate wing of the main lodge. Marcus told his parents he was going to check the perimeter and make sure all the cabins were secure. Standard procedure. He never came back to the main lodge that night. Because at 10:47 p.m., according to later forensic analysis, Marcus Brennan retrieved a Remington 700 rifle from the storage shed, loaded it with .30-06 rounds, and walked to the first cabin. The cabin where Catherine Lowe was staying. The woman who had smiled at him at dinner. The woman he'd decided was mocking him. Catherine Lowe was reading when Marcus knocked on her cabin door. She answered in her robe, holding a glass of wine. Marcus asked if everything was comfortable, if she needed extra blankets. She said no, everything was fine, and started to close the door. That's when Marcus forced his way inside. What happened next was reconstructed through forensic evidence and Marcus's own journal, which was later recovered. Marcus tried to kiss Catherine. She pushed him away, confused, telling him to leave. Marcus grabbed her arm. She screamed. He panicked, and he shot her. Once, in the chest, at close range. Catherine collapsed against the bed, blood spreading across her white robe. Marcus stood over her, breathing hard, watching her die. According to his journal, he wrote, "She looked surprised, like she didn't understand, but I knew. I knew she'd been playing games with me all night, smiling, pretending. I couldn't let her keep doing that." Catherine Lowe died within minutes. Marcus dragged her body behind the cabin and covered it with pine branches. Then he returned to the cabin, wiped down surfaces, and locked the door from the outside. He had 35 hours until Ray Hutchins' scheduled supply delivery. 35 hours to finish what he'd started. Because standing in Catherine's cabin, Marcus had an epiphany. He was in control now. He was the hunter, and everyone else at the lodge was prey. Saturday, October 9th, 1976, 6 a.m. The guests woke to a crisp autumn morning. Frost coated the ground. Visibility was perfect, ideal hunting conditions.
Charles Brennan prepared breakfast, while Dorothy set the table. Marcus appeared at 6:30, claiming he'd woken early to scout trails. His parents noticed nothing unusual. The hunting parties gathered at 7 a.m. 10 people planned to hunt that day. Richard Caldwell and Thomas Perry, one group. James Rucker and David Marsh, another group. Kyle Marsh, going solo, supervised by his father. Vincent Torres, solo. The women, Susan Caldwell, Helen Perry, and Jennifer Marsh, planned to stay at the lodge and hike nearby trails. Charles and Dorothy would remain at the lodge to prepare lunch. Catherine Lowe's absence was noted. Dorothy knocked on her cabin door. No answer. They assumed she was sleeping in. The hunting parties departed between 7:15 and 7:30, spreading out across different sections of the forest. Marcus volunteered to check the eastern ridge for elk sign. He carried his Remington 700. No one questioned it. By 8 a.m., the lodge was quiet. Dorothy and Susan Caldwell sat on the porch with coffee. Helen Perry read in the Great Hall. Jennifer Marsh was in her cabin, journaling. Charles went to the storage shed to organize equipment. And Marcus Brennan was in the forest, watching Thomas Perry through his rifle scope. Thomas Perry, the 52-year-old dentist from Spokane, was tracking a deer when Marcus shot him. The bullet entered his lower back, severing his spine. Thomas collapsed face first into the underbrush, paralyzed from the waist down but conscious. He screamed for help. Richard Caldwell, hunting 200 yards away, heard the scream. He ran toward the sound, calling Thomas's name. Marcus was waiting. He shot Richard through the throat as he emerged from the tree line. Richard dropped instantly, clutching his neck, blood spraying between his fingers. He bled out in less than 3 minutes. Marcus approached Thomas Perry, who was still alive, writhing in pain. He begged, pleaded, asked what was happening. Marcus didn't answer. He shot him in the head. 2 kills in 6 minutes. Marcus dragged Richard's body into a ravine and covered it with branches. Then he returned to the woods, hunting the others.
By 9:30 a.m., Marcus had located James Rucker and David Marsh. They were together, glassing a hillside for elk. Marcus circled around, approaching from above. He waited until they separated, James moving left, David moving right. Marcus shot David Marsh first. The bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him around. David fell, crying out. James heard the shot and ran toward his friend. Marcus shot James in the leg. James went down hard, screaming. Marcus emerged from the tree line, rifle raised. Both men were wounded but alive, staring up at him in confusion and terror. James recognized Marcus. "What are you doing? Help us!" Marcus shot James in the chest. Then he turned to David Marsh, who was crawling away, leaving a blood trail. Marcus followed slowly, letting David drag himself 20 yards before shooting him in the back of the head. 4 dead. Marcus checked his ammunition. He had 15 rounds left. Plenty. 10:15 a.m. Back at the lodge, Dorothy Brennan was starting to worry. No one had returned, no one had radioed. The lodge had walkie-talkies for hunters to check in. She mentioned it to Susan Caldwell and Helen Perry. "They're probably just tracking something," Susan said, but her voice was uncertain. Dorothy decided to walk to Catherine Lowe's cabin to check on her again. She knocked. No answer. She tried the door. Locked. Through the window, Dorothy could see the bed was made. Catherine's suitcase was open on the chair. Everything looked normal. Maybe she'd gone for a walk. Dorothy returned to the main lodge. She didn't notice the blood drops on the porch steps of Catherine's cabin. Small, easily missed. At 10:30 a.m., Marcus returned to the lodge. He entered through the back, placing his rifle in the storage shed. Then he walked to the main building where his mother and the 3 women were in the kitchen. "Any luck?" Dorothy asked. Marcus shook his head. "Nothing yet. I'm going to rest for a bit." He went upstairs to his room. Dorothy, Susan, and Helen continued preparing lunch. Jennifer Marsh joined them. The four women talked, laughed, wondered when the men would return. They had no idea 3 of their husbands were already dead. 11 a.m. Charles Brennan walked to the storage shed to retrieve firewood. He passed Marcus's room and knocked. "You okay, son?" "Fine, Dad." "Need anything?" "No, just tired." Charles continued downstairs. In his room, Marcus was writing in his journal. The entry, later recovered by police, read, "4 down, I feel nothing. That surprises me. I thought I'd feel something, guilt, fear, excitement, but there's just calm, like I've found what I was supposed to be doing all along. The men were easy, they didn't see me coming. The women will be harder, they're at the lodge. I'll have to wait until tonight. Dad and Mom too. I'm sorry for that, but they brought me back here. They made me do this job for people who don't respect me. This is their fault." Marcus set down his pen. He checked his watch. 7 hours until dark.
12:30 p.m. Lunch was ready, but none of the hunters had returned. Dorothy was now genuinely worried. She convinced Charles to take the ATV and ride the trails to look for them. Charles agreed. He told the women to stay at the lodge, that he'd be back within an hour. Marcus volunteered to go with him. "No, you stay here," Charles said. "Help your mother." Charles left at 12:45 p.m. He never came back, because 2 miles up the eastern trail, he found David Marsh's body. Charles stopped the ATV, confused. He approached slowly, calling David's name. When he realized David was dead, shot, his mind raced. Hunting accident? But where was everyone else? He turned back toward the ATV. Marcus stepped out from behind a tree. Charles stared at his son. "Marcus? What?" Marcus raised the rifle. "I'm sorry, Dad." Charles's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "What I have to." Marcus shot his father in the chest. Charles fell backward, blood spreading across his flannel shirt. He looked up at Marcus, mouth moving, trying to speak. Marcus knelt beside him. "You should have left me at school. I was fine there." Charles Brennan died at 1:03 p.m., according to the forensic timeline. Marcus dragged his father's body off the trail and covered it with branches. Then he disabled the ATV, removed the spark plug, and threw it into the ravine. He started walking back to the lodge. 5 dead, 7 to go. October 10th, 1976, 8:47 in the morning. Ray Hutchins had been driving supply trucks to the Clearwater Hunting Lodge for 11 years. Every Sunday morning, same route, 63 miles northeast of Coeur d'Alene, deep into the Bitterroot Range. The lodge sat at the end of a winding dirt road surrounded by 9,000 acres of private forest. In peak hunting season, the drive was second nature. But that morning, something was wrong. The gate at the bottom of the access road was wide open. Ray slowed his truck. The gate was always closed unless someone was coming or going, and checkout wasn't until noon. He pulled through, scanning the tree line. The forest was dead silent. No birdsong, no wind rustling through the pines. Just nothing. As he rounded the final bend, the lodge came into view. A sprawling 2-story log structure with a wraparound porch, flanked by 6 guest cabins arranged in a semicircle. Smoke rose from the main chimney. Everything looked normal.
but Ray's gut twisted. The front door was open. He parked his truck and stepped out. The air smelled like pine and something else, something metallic and rotten. He called out, "Hello? Charlie? Anyone here?" No response. He climbed the porch steps. The wood creaked under his boots. He pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The entrance hall was dark. The lights were off, but daylight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Ray moved toward the main room, the great hall where guests gathered for meals and drinks. The door was ajar. He pushed it open, and then he saw them. 11 bodies. They were arranged throughout the room in grotesque tableaus. A man knelt beside the fireplace, slumped forward with a rifle across his lap, as if he'd been posing for a photograph. 2 bodies sat in chairs at the dining table, positioned with forks in their hands and plates of rotting food in front of them. A woman lay draped across the leather sofa, one arm hanging toward the floor, her face turned toward the ceiling. Ray stumbled backward, hand over his mouth. His mind couldn't process what he was seeing. Blood had pooled beneath most of the bodies, dark and sticky on the wooden floors. The smell hit him fully now. Decay, copper, human waste. He ran. Back through the hall, out the front door, into his truck. His hands shook as he fumbled for the CB radio. He keyed the mic 3 times before his voice worked. "This is Ray Hutchins on Route 12. I need police at the Clearwater Lodge. There's bodies. Lots of bodies. Everyone's dead." The dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker. "Copy that, Ray. How many casualties?" Ray's voice broke. "All of them."
Before we continue with what happened next, it's important to understand who these people were. Not just names in a police report, not just victims of a massacre. Real people with real lives, families who loved them, dreams they'd never fulfill. This is who died at Clearwater Lodge. Richard Caldwell, age 48. Richard grew up in Spokane, the son of a World War II veteran and a school teacher. He started his construction company in 1965 with a single truck and a $3,000 loan. By 1976, Caldwell Construction employed 42 people and had built half the new subdivisions in the Spokane Valley. Richard was known for his loud laugh and his generosity. He paid his workers above market rate. He sponsored his daughter's soccer team. Every Thanksgiving, he personally delivered turkeys to his employees' families. He and Susan had been married 23 years. They had 3 children, Amanda, 19, Sarah, 16, and Robert, 14. Richard never missed a school event. He coached Little League for 8 years. Hunting was his escape. He'd been coming to Clearwater Lodge every October since 1973. He loved the solitude, the challenge, the ritual of it. His last words, according to forensic reconstruction, were likely, "Thomas? Thomas, are you okay?" He died trying to help his friend. Susan Caldwell, age 46. Susan was an elementary school teacher, 2nd grade, 21 years in the same classroom. Her students called her Mrs. C. She kept a jar of lollipops on her desk and knew every child's birthday. Parents requested her specifically. She had a reputation for turning around difficult kids with patience and kindness. Susan didn't hunt. She came to Clearwater because Richard loved it, and she loved him. She spent her weekends at the lodge reading, knitting, and hiking the easy trails. She'd taught herself to identify 30 different bird species in the Bitterroot Range. She wrote letters to her children every day she was away, even though she'd only be gone 3 days. The letters were found in her cabin, unsent. Amanda remembered to feed Copper twice a day. Sarah
Good luck on your history test. I know you'll do great. Robert, practice your trumpet. I want to hear when the saints marching in when I get home. Love you all so much. Be good for Grandma. Home soon. Mom. She would never send those letters. Thomas Perry, age 52. Thomas was a dentist with a practice in downtown Spokane. He'd built a successful career over 25 years, known for his gentle chair-side manner and his willingness to work with low-income patients on payment plans. He and Helen had been married 28 years, no children. They'd tried for years, undergone fertility treatments, and eventually made peace with it being just the two of them. They traveled, they volunteered at their church, they had 3 dogs. Thomas had taken up hunting late in life, just 2 years prior. It was Helen's idea. She'd noticed him becoming withdrawn after his brother died of cancer. She encouraged him to find a hobby, something to look forward to. Clearwater Lodge was his first hunting trip. He was excited, nervous. He'd practiced at the rifle range for months. He'd read books about tracking and field dressing. He wanted to do it right. His last journal entry, written Friday night, said, "Day 1 at the lodge. Everyone's friendly. The forest is beautiful. I saw 3 deer on the drive-in. Helen says I'm like a kid at Christmas. She's right. I can't sleep. Tomorrow I'll finally know what all the fuss is about. Maybe I'll get lucky." He did get lucky. He saw an 8-point buck just before Marcus killed him.
Helen Perry, age 50. Helen worked as a nurse at Sacred Heart Medical Center in Spokane, labor and delivery. She'd helped bring over 2,000 babies into the world during her career. Her co-workers described her as unflappable, calm in crises, the person you wanted in the room when things went wrong. Helen loved birds. She kept binoculars in her purse and a field guide in her car. She could identify bird calls without seeing the bird. At Clearwater, she'd planned to spend her weekend bird watching while Thomas hunted. She'd brought a new camera, a Nikon F2 she'd been saving for a year. She wanted to photograph warblers and thrushes. The camera was found in her cabin, unused. James Rucker, age 39. James was an accountant at a mid-sized firm in Spokane. Single, never married, lived alone in a studio apartment downtown. His co-workers knew him as quiet and meticulous. He always ate lunch at his desk. He didn't socialize much, but he was brilliant with numbers. Hunting was James's passion. He went every season: deer, elk, turkey, duck. He belonged to a hunting club. He reloaded his own ammunition. He had a wall of mounted trophy heads in his apartment. His friends from the club described him as a different person in the woods: open, happy, alive. James had been planning this trip for 6 months. He'd taken time off work, saved vacation days. He'd told his co-workers he was going after a bull elk he'd been tracking for 2 years. His rifle was found next to his body. He never got a shot off. David Marsh, age 44. David was an electrician, union member for 20 years. He worked on commercial buildings mostly, schools, hospitals, office complexes. He was proud of his work. He'd point out buildings around Spokane and say, "I wired that one." His kids would roll their eyes, but David didn't care. He wanted them to know the value of skilled labor. David had been bringing his son Kyle hunting since Kyle was 12. Father-son tradition. They'd shot Kyle's first deer together 3 years ago. David had the photo framed in his workshop. This was the first year David's daughter Jennifer was old enough to come along. She didn't hunt, but David wanted her to see the lodge, experience the forest, spend time with her brother. David's wife had died of breast cancer in 1974. These trips were how David reconnected with his kids, how he made sure they knew he was still there for them.
His last words, according to Marcus's journal, were, "Please, I have kids." Marcus shot him anyway. Kyle Marsh, age 27. Kyle was a senior at North Central High School in Spokane. Honor roll student, varsity baseball. He'd been accepted early decision to Washington State University for the fall of 1977. He wanted to study forestry. He loved the woods. He'd grown up hunting with his dad, and it had shaped who he was. He didn't drink, didn't party. His idea of a perfect Friday night was camping with friends. His girlfriend, Amy, had given him a compass for his birthday, engraved, "So you always find your way home." Kyle was wearing it when he died. Jennifer Marsh, age 16. Jennifer was a sophomore at North Central High. She was shy, artistic. She wanted to be a veterinarian. She'd been reluctant to come on the trip. She didn't like hunting. She didn't like guns. But her dad asked her to come, said it would mean a lot to him, so she said yes. She brought her sketchbook. She planned to draw the animals she saw, the landscapes, the lodge itself. Her sketchbook was found in her cabin. The last page showed a partially finished drawing of a deer in the forest. She never got to finish it.
Catherine Lowe, age 41. Catherine was a real estate agent, top seller in her agency 3 years running. Divorced, no children. She lived for her work and her friends. She was vibrant, funny, the kind of person who lit up a room. She wore bright scarves and laughed too loud and didn't care what anyone thought. Clearwater Lodge was a solo trip. Catherine had been going through a hard year. Her ex-husband had remarried, her father had died, she'd lost a big sale. She needed to get away, clear her head. Her best friend, Linda, tried to talk her out of going alone. "Come with me," Catherine said. "We'll make it a girls' trip." Linda couldn't get the time off work. "Next time," Linda said. There wouldn't be a next time. Vincent Torres, age 35. Vincent taught 8th grade English at Garfield Middle School in Spokane. He was beloved by his students. He assigned unconventional books. He let kids call him Mr. T. He stayed late to help struggling readers. Vincent was gay. He wasn't open about it, not in 1976, not in Spokane. But his close friends knew. He'd been seeing someone for 6 months, a man named Paul. They were careful, discreet. Paul didn't know Vincent was going hunting. He told him he was visiting family. He was afraid Paul would worry. Vincent's body was found with a letter in his jacket pocket, unsealed, unaddressed. It read, "Paul, if you're reading this, something happened. I'm sorry I didn't tell you where I really went. I needed to do something for myself, something that felt like mine. I hope you understand. I hope you know I love you. V." Paul never got the letter. Police didn't know who Paul was. The letter stayed in evidence until 2003, when the case files were digitized. A researcher found it and posted it online asking if anyone knew Paul's identity. No one ever came forward. Charles Brennan, age 68. Charles bought Clearwater Lodge in 1968 after retiring from a career in civil engineering. He'd always dreamed of owning property in the mountains. The lodge was his legacy project. He was a good man, patient, kind. He treated guests like family. He remembered their names, their kids' names, what they'd hunted the previous year. Charles never saw it coming. He died believing his son was sick, confused that something was wrong. He never understood that Marcus knew exactly what he was doing. Dorothy Brennan, age 65. Dorothy was a retired school teacher. She'd taught high school English for 30 years. She loved books. She loved cooking. She loved hosting.
Running the lodge with Charles was her dream retirement. She handled the hospitality side, meal planning, decorating, making guests feel at home. Dorothy had 3 children. Marcus was the youngest, her baby. She'd always been protective of him. When he struggled socially, she told herself he was just shy. When he had trouble at college, she told herself he needed time. She never imagined he was capable of violence. Marcus Brennan, age 21. And then there was Marcus. Quiet, awkward, invisible. The boy who never fit. The son who disappointed his parents without trying. The young man who snapped. We'll talk more about Marcus later, but first, we need to finish what he started.
2 p.m., Saturday, October 9th. Marcus returned to the lodge. Dorothy, Susan, Helen, and Jennifer were in the Great Hall, waiting. They'd finished lunch, cleaned up. Now they were just sitting, anxious. "Where's your father?" Marcus asked Dorothy. "He's still out on the trails," Marcus lied. "He wanted me to come back and tell you he'll be a while. He found some tracks." Dorothy frowned. "What about the others? No one's radioed?" "Probably spread out. You know how it is when they're tracking." Dorothy nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Marcus excused himself, saying he needed to clean his rifle. He went to the storage shed. Once there, he reloaded, counted his ammunition, 36 rounds left, more than enough. He sat on a workbench and opened his journal. The entry he wrote at 2:15 p.m. read, "Dad's dead. I didn't want to, but he would have stopped me. Mom's next, then the women. I'll wait until dark. Easier that way. They won't see me coming. I've thought about how to do it. Kitchen first, then the cabins. I need to move fast. Can't let them scatter. The boy, Kyle, he's still out there. I'll find him after. This will all be done by morning." Marcus closed the journal. He waited. 3 p.m. Dorothy was pacing. "Something's wrong," she said to Susan. "Charles should be back by now. The men should be back." "Maybe they went further than planned," offered Susan. "Without radioing? Without telling us?" Helen stood. "Should we go look for them?" Dorothy hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, let's take the truck. We'll drive the main trails." The 4 women gathered jackets and walked to the parking area. The lodge's Ford pickup was parked near the main building. Dorothy grabbed the keys from inside. Marcus watched from the storage shed window. He couldn't let them leave. He walked quickly to the truck, opened the hood, and yanked out the distributor cap. He pocketed it and returned to the shed. Dorothy turned the key. The engine cranked but wouldn't start. She tried again. Nothing. "Damn it," Dorothy muttered. "Of course." She got out, checked under the hood. She wasn't a mechanic, but she could tell something was missing. "Marcus," she called. Marcus emerged from the shed. "Yeah?" "The truck won't start. Can you look at it?" Marcus made a show of checking the engine. "Distributor cap's gone. Might have fallen off on the last drive. I can try to find it, but—" Dorothy sighed. "Fine, we'll wait." The women returned to the lodge. Marcus stayed by the truck, pretending to search for the part. In reality, he was watching the tree line, waiting for Kyle Marsh to come back.
Kyle Marsh was still alive. He'd been hunting the southern ridge, miles from where Marcus killed his father. He had no idea what was happening. At 3:30 p.m., Kyle shot a deer. A young buck, 4 points, clean shot through the lungs. Kyle field dressed it quickly, working by muscle memory. His dad had taught him well. He radioed the lodge. "This is Kyle. I got one. Coming back now. Over. No response. He tried again. Lodge, this is Kyle. Do you copy? Static. Kyle frowned. Radio must be off, or out of range. He shouldered his rifle and started dragging the deer toward the trail. It would take him 45 minutes to get back to the lodge. He was smiling. He couldn't wait to show his dad. 4 p.m. Darkness was settling into the forest. The temperature dropped. Inside the lodge, Dorothy lit a fire in the great hall. The 4 women sat close to it, wrapped in blankets. No one was talking much anymore. Jennifer was crying quietly. Susan held her hand. "They're okay," Susan said. "They have to be." Helen wasn't so sure. She kept glancing at the windows, at the darkening woods beyond. Marcus entered the great hall. "Still no luck with the truck," he said. "I think we should just wait until morning. They'll come back when it's too dark to hunt." Dorothy nodded slowly. "You're probably right." Marcus sat down by the fire. He could feel their fear. It excited him. He checked his watch. 5 p.m. would be full dark. 1 more hour. 4:47 p.m. Kyle Marsh emerged from the tree line. He was exhausted. The deer had been heavier than expected. He'd had to stop 3 times to rest. But he'd made it. He could see the lodge lights through the trees. Home. He dragged the deer to the clearing near the cabins and left it there. He'd show his dad, then they'd hang it in the shed together. Kyle walked toward the main lodge. Marcus was waiting on the porch. "Hey, Marcus," Kyle called, grinning. "I got one. Where's my dad?" Marcus stepped into the light. Kyle's smile faded. "What are you—" Marcus shot him. The bullet hit Kyle in the stomach. Kyle staggered backward, hands clutching his abdomen, eyes wide with shock. He fell to his knees. "Why?" Kyle gasped. Marcus approached. "You were nice to me," Marcus said quietly. "That's worse than the ones who ignored me." He shot Kyle again, this time in the chest. Kyle collapsed onto his side, blood pooling beneath him. He died, looking at the deer he'd killed.
Inside the lodge, the women heard the shots. Dorothy jumped to her feet. What was that? Susan's face went pale. Gunshots. Helen moved to the window. Oh my God! Jennifer started screaming, because through the window they could see Kyle's body in the clearing and Marcus standing over it. Dorothy's mind couldn't process it. Marcus? What? No, that's not... Marcus turned toward the lodge. He started walking toward the door. Lock it! Helen shouted. Lock the door! Susan ran to the front door and threw the deadbolt. But there were other doors. The back entrance, the kitchen, the... Glass shattered. Marcus had smashed the kitchen window. Run! Dorothy screamed. The women scattered. Susan and Jennifer ran upstairs. Helen ran toward the back of the lodge. Dorothy stood frozen, staring at the kitchen door as Marcus climbed through the window. Marcus, please, Dorothy whispered. What are you doing? Marcus raised the rifle. I'm sorry, Mom. She shot her mother in the chest. Dorothy fell backward, hitting the floor hard. Blood spread across her white blouse. She looked up at her son, confusion and pain in her eyes. Marcus! He shot her again. Dorothy Brennan died at 4:51 p.m. Marcus stepped over her body and walked toward the stairs. Susan Caldwell and Jennifer Marsh barricaded themselves in one of the upstairs bedrooms. They pushed a dresser against the door. Jennifer was sobbing. Susan tried to stay calm, but her hands were shaking. We need to get out, Susan whispered. The window! They opened the window. It was a 12-foot drop to the ground. Susan went first, hanging from the ledge before letting go. She landed hard, twisting her ankle, but she got up. Jump! She called to Jennifer. Jennifer hesitated. Behind her, Marcus kicked the bedroom door. Once, twice. The dresser shifted. Jennifer, now!
Jennifer climbed out the window, dangled for a moment, and dropped. She landed badly, crying out in pain. Susan grabbed her, pulled her to her feet. They ran toward the tree line. Behind them, Marcus appeared at the window. He aimed, fired. Susan felt the bullet hit her back. The impact knocked her forward. She stumbled, fell. Jennifer kept running. "Don't stop!" Susan screamed. "Don't stop!" Jennifer disappeared into the forest. Susan tried to crawl. Marcus shot her again. She stopped moving. Helen Perry had run to the back of the lodge, into Charles and Dorothy's private quarters. She locked herself in the bathroom. She was hyperventilating, trying to think. There was a small window above the toilet. Maybe she could... The bathroom door exploded inward. Marcus had shot the lock. Helen screamed. Marcus fired twice. Helen Perry died, slumped against the bathtub. Marcus stood in the lodge, breathing hard. 7 bodies inside, 5 in the forest, 1 running. Jennifer Marsh was still alive. Marcus reloaded his rifle. He grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen, and he walked into the forest. The hunt wasn't over yet.
5:03 p.m. Jennifer Marsh was running blind through the forest. She had no flashlight, no weapon, no idea where she was going. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't stop. Behind her, she could hear Marcus, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the trees, his footsteps crunching on pine needles. He was tracking her, and he was in no hurry. Jennifer had grown up in Spokane. She'd been on camping trips. She knew you were supposed to find water, follow it downstream. But it was dark. She couldn't see the ground. She kept tripping over roots, stumbling into trees. She could still hear the flashlight behind her, getting closer. Jennifer changed direction, veering left. She climbed a small ridge, slipping on loose rocks, scraping her hands. At the top, she crouched behind a boulder and tried to catch her breath. Silence. Where was he? Then, the flashlight beam swept across the rocks 10 feet below her. Marcus was standing at the base of the ridge. "Jennifer," he called. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "You can't run forever. You're going to get lost, freeze to death out here." Jennifer clamped a hand over her mouth to muffle her breathing. "I don't want to hurt you," Marcus continued. "I just want to finish this. Make it quick, painless." He started climbing the ridge. Jennifer bolted. She ran along the ridgeline, blind, desperate. Her foot caught on something, a root, a rock, and she went down hard, slamming into the ground. Pain shot through her knee. She tried to get up, couldn't. The flashlight beam found her. Marcus stood over her, rifle pointed at her head. Jennifer looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she whispered, "please don't." Marcus's finger moved to the trigger. And then, something hit him from the side. Vincent Torres had survived. He'd been hunting the western slopes when he heard the first gunshots. At first, he thought it was other hunters, but then he heard screaming. He'd started back toward the lodge, moving cautiously. He'd found James Rucker's body, then David Marsh's. Vincent had realized someone was killing them. He'd hidden in the forest, watching the lodge from a distance. He'd seen Marcus shoot Kyle, seen the women flee, heard more gunshots. Vincent had considered running, getting as far away as possible. But then he'd seen Jennifer escape into the woods, and Marcus follow her. Vincent couldn't leave her. So he tracked them, stayed behind Marcus, using the sound of Marcus's footsteps to guide him. And when Marcus raised his rifle to kill Jennifer, Vincent had charged.
Now the two men were on the ground, grappling. Marcus was younger, stronger, but Vincent was fighting for Jennifer's life.
Marcus threw Vincent off and scrambled for the rifle. Vincent lunged, grabbing Marcus's leg, pulling him back. Marcus kicked him in the face. Vincent's nose broke. Blood poured down his face. Marcus grabbed the rifle, swung it like a club, and hit Vincent in the head. Vincent collapsed. Marcus stood, breathing hard, and aimed the rifle at Vincent's chest. "You should have run," Marcus said. He pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. Marcus's eyes widened. He'd lost count of his shots. Vincent saw his chance. He surged to his feet and tackled Marcus again, this time with everything he had. They went over the edge of the ridge, 10 feet down. Both men hit the ground hard. Marcus landed on his back. The impact knocked the wind out of him. Vincent landed on top of him, and then Vincent's hands were around Marcus's throat. He squeezed. Marcus thrashed, clawing at Vincent's hands, trying to breathe. Vincent didn't let go. He thought about James, David, Kyle, all of them. He squeezed harder. Marcus's face turned purple, his eyes bulged, and then Vincent felt something cold press against his side. He looked down. Marcus had pulled a hunting knife from his belt. Before Vincent could react, Marcus drove the blade into his ribs, once, twice, 3 times. Vincent gasped and fell sideways, clutching his side. Blood poured between his fingers. Marcus coughed, gasping for air, rubbing his throat. He stood slowly, retrieving the knife. Vincent lay on the ground, dying. "You almost had me," Marcus said, his voice raspy. He knelt beside Vincent and slit his throat.
Sunday, October 10th, 1976. October 10th, 1976, 8:47 a.m. Ray Hutchins discovered the bodies. Police arrived, secured the scene, and then they found Marcus. He was in the barn, sitting on a hay bale. He'd written 127 pages in his journal overnight, a detailed account of everything he'd done, every kill, every thought, every justification. When Sheriff Holloway approached with his weapon drawn, Marcus didn't resist. He simply said, "I'm ready." Marcus Brennan was charged with 11 counts of first-degree murder. The trial began in March 1977. It lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented the journal, forensic evidence, Jennifer Marsh's testimony. The defense argued insanity, claimed Marcus had suffered a psychotic break. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Marcus to 11 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Marcus showed no emotion. When asked if he had anything to say, he replied, "I wish I'd finished." Marcus Brennan is currently housed at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. He's 69 years old now. He's been in prison for 48 years. In that time, he's given 3 interviews. In 1989, a journalist asked him if he felt remorse. Marcus said, "I feel nothing." In 2001, a psychologist asked him what he thought about during those 36 hours. Marcus said, "Power, control, finally being seen." In 2015, a true crime author asked him about Jennifer Marsh, why he let her live. Marcus was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I saw myself in her, terrified, alone, pathetic. I couldn't kill that." The author asked if he wished he had. Marcus smiled. "Every single day."
Jennifer Marsh survived. Physically.
She spent 3 weeks in the hospital, had 2 surgeries on her knee, went through months of physical therapy, but the mental scars never healed. Jennifer dropped out of high school, moved away from Spokane, changed her name. For years, no one knew where she was. Then, in 2003, she gave an interview to a documentary filmmaker. She was 43 years old, living in Oregon, working as a librarian. She'd never married, never had children. She said, "I survived, but I didn't live. I don't know how." The interviewer asked if she still thought about that night. Jennifer laughed, a broken sound. "Every night. When I close my eyes, I'm still running through those woods. I'm still hearing his footsteps. I'm still waiting for him to pull the trigger." She paused. "Sometimes I wish he had." The Clearwater Hunting Lodge was demolished in 1978. The land was sold to the U.S. Forest Service. It's part of a protected wilderness area now. You can still hike there. The foundations of the lodge and cabins are still visible, overgrown with moss, reclaimed by the forest. People say it's haunted. Locals avoid it, but every year a few true crime enthusiasts make the trek. They stand where the lodge once stood. They try to imagine what happened. Most can't. Some say they hear things in the woods at night. Footsteps, whispers, screaming. Probably just the wind. Probably. 11 people died at Clearwater Lodge in October 1976. Richard Caldwell, Susan Caldwell, Thomas Perry, Helen Perry, James Rucker, David Marsh, Kyle Marsh, Catherine Lowe, Vincent Torres, Charles Brennan, Dorothy Brennan. They were parents, spouses, teachers, workers, dreamers. They went to the mountains to hunt, to relax, to spend time together. They never came home. And the man who killed them, he's still alive, still breathing, still thinking about what he did, still wishing he'd finished. This was the Clearwater Hunting Lodge Massacre. 11 dead, 1 survivor, and a killer who will die in prison but never pay enough. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real patterns of violence and the psychology of mass murder. All names, locations, and events have been created for this dramatization. If you want to support this channel, please like, subscribe, and share. More stories coming soon. Until then, stay safe.